This is Judge Joe Brown, and we're listening to We All Be News. News-free Dixie for the 21st century.
Welcome, boys and girls, scholars and laymen, to another wonderful infotainment, edutainment edition of The Artivist Thinks. I'm your host for this empowerment segment, Brother Ron, also known as R2, C2, H2, The Artivist, and you are in the We All Be experience because we all be in it to win it. News-free Dixie for the 21st century. Once again, it's News-free Dixie for the 21st century. And right now, I am talking to you all on a very important day, a very dark day in the annals of Black August, a very bright day also in the annals of Black August. Today, August 28th, 2015, or tonight rather, marks the 60th anniversary of the murder, lynching, torture of one Emmett Till, the death that started the modern day civil rights movement. The modern day African American civil rights movement was started with the lynching of a 14-year-old black kid visiting his relatives down in the Mississippi Delta. He was kidnapped August 28th, 1955 in the middle of the night and tortured and later murdered by two brothers and some would say several black accomplices in the Mississippi Delta. So why is this so important to talk about today? Because also today is the if I get it right, boys and girls, please forgive. Let me see if I get it right. What is today? It gotta be the 52nd anniversary of the March on Washington, where Dr. King did his quote-unquote famous I Have a Dream speech. I call it the reparation speech or insufficient funds speech, because he talked about reparations and about the fact that they tried to cash a check, but it came back, it bounced insufficient funds. So that's why I look at it. Like, for example, his last speech, the mountaintop speech, I don't see it as the mountaintop speech. I see it as the black nationalism, black economic speech, where he's telling black folks to pull their resources together to control their economic destiny, invest in black businesses, boycott white businesses. So all this stuff. But anyway, let's get back. The 60th anniversary of Emmett Till, of his killing. Sister Rosa Parks said that when she was sitting on that bus, which will also be 60 years ago on December 1st, 1955, the person she was thinking about was that poor Emmett Till. His face, I mean, once you see that picture of his disfigured and mutilated face, it stays with you for the rest of your life. I was made aware of the killing of Emmett Till when I was a young boy. I grew up in Memphis, Tennessee, which is part of the Delta. Some people say that's the capital of Mississippi Delta, Memphis, Tennessee. And I had elders, my grandma, my maternal grandmother, my maternal grandfather, and relatives. They all come out of Mississippi, so they are very well acquainted with their story of Emmett Till, this young black kid, nice looking, handsome, well off black kid with some baby fat coming down to the Mississippi Delta from Chicago. His mom, Mammy, being a former resident and native of Mississippi, told him, "Boy, mind your P's and Q's, boy. Do what the grown folks tell you, because they ain't gonna be Chicago, Mississippi." Because a lot of folks came from the South up to the North during the Great Migration, which took place for the first half of the 20th century, where blacks migrated from the fields and went into the urban city setting. They went from the shack house to the projects. From the shotgun homes with the tin roofs to the projects. But anyway, he was sitting down there to spend the summer with his relatives. His great uncle Moses Wright, who was a minister down there as well, and also his cousins. And legend has it that he went to Bryant's grocery store down there in the Delta, and he wolf whistled at the owner's wife, who was running the counter, the cashier, Carolyn Bryant, who was a former beauty queen. That's what it went. They said that he said something to her like, "Hey, baby," and wolf whistled at her. But my understanding from different versions is that he had a speech impediment, and he was told when he's about to stutter to whistle to keep from stuttering. There's so many different versions of this. That's what make history so interesting. So there's so many different versions upon versions. And I recently heard a version that Carolyn Brown was actually known for messing around with black men or black boys. And because, she was, like I said, she was a former beauty queen. She did pageants, and a source told me that she was trying to hit on Emmett Till, and Emmett Till refused her advance. But from my understanding, that's just, another theory upon theory, another version. But I think she kept it to herself. But black folks who patronized the store, they start, spreading the rumor around what happened. And I think one of the black customers told Roy Bryant, her husband, he was out of town. I don't know, he's hunting or on business. He was out of town. He heard it. And then him with his half brother, J.W. Malum, who was a World War II veteran known to be tough on black asses, they went looking for this kid from Chicago. Now, his cousins were with him that day the incident happened, whatever went down. But they did not tell Moses Wright. And I believe had they told Moses Wright, that not only would Emmett Till left town, but the whole family would have got out of town. Because as you know, if you're not familiar, is that, white supremacy, when you black, don't care if you guilty or innocent of any damn thing. Because you have no rights that should be respected by the white supremacists in the white supremacist system. So we got to understand what we're dealing with. So had Moses Wright known what happened in that store, I have no doubt that he would have got himself, Emmett Till, and his family on the next thing smoking to Chicago. But unfortunately, that didn't happen. So, after they didn't hear anything for a couple of days, the cousins and Emmett, I guess they went along as business as usual down in the Sleepy Delta. But the night of August 28th, Roy Bryant and his brother, J.W. Malum, went to Moses Wright home to look for the boy from Chicago. And I think in Moses Wright mind was that it was just going to scare him and, maybe beat him up or rough him up a little bit and scare him. But I don't think he thought they would have killed him for the offense that he allegedly did. So, people say, well, why did Moses Wright let them take his nephew, his great nephew? Well, you had a house full of people. And it's hard to say. I'm not going to call him a coward because it's so easy for us to do Monday morning quarterbacking about what happened 60 years ago. You got to understand everything in its proper context. He had a house full of people. And these guys came in the middle of the night. He was not told about what transpired days earlier. And I'm sure he didn't want to give up young Emmett, but I'm sure they threatened him. Because I think either J.W. or Roy Bryant asked how old Moses was. And he told him his age. And basically said, nigga, if you want to live to be so-and-so age, you better give us that boy or give us what we want. So I believe Moses Wright, when he testified, or in his later, testimony or whatever he told people, is that he heard a woman voice identify Emmett Till. Now there's controversy to whether that woman's voice was Carolyn Bryant, the former beauty pageant and Roy Bryant's wife, who identified Emmett. Because, as my good friend or a friend of mine, who we have interviewed on We All Be, Keith Beauchamp, he did a documentary about Emmett Till, which actually got the FBI to reopen the case and exhume Emmett Till's body in 2005. And they were looking to charge Carolyn Bryant with, being a part of the conspiracy to kill Emmett Till. Excuse me. So, but they didn't end up prosecuting. The local prosecutor down there, who was an African-American woman, she decided not to pursue charges against Carolyn Bryant under some controversy. But we'll get a little bit into that later on. But, so he was identified by a woman's voice. And he was taken away by Bryant and his brother. And my understanding was black people involved. I know t.r.m. Howard, the wealthiest black man in Mississippi at that point, also a civil rights legend, a true unsung civil rights legend, who was the mentors to the Evers brothers, Charles and Medgar Evers and Fannie Lou Hamer, and who were one of the leaders and organizers of the Regional Council Negro Leadership. He financed his own private investigation And he found out back then that maybe there were probably up to 10 or 14 people involved in the kidnapping and murder of Emmett Till. And many of those people were black people. So, that brings us up to this other interesting. So, they kidnapped Emmett. The family had not heard from Emmett. Then, a white father and son was fishing in the Tallahatchie River. And they discovered Emmett Till's bloated, mutilated body, which was tied to a 75-pound cotton gin. I think they call it a cotton fan. Cotton gin fan. A 75-pound cotton gin fan, I believe, to weigh it down in the water. But as the way God works in mysterious ways, the body rose up to the surface. The state of Mississippi tried to bury the remains of the child as quick as possible. But somehow the governor of Illinois found out about it. And it literally stopped him from being buried. Like, he actually was in the process of being lowered into the ground and about to be buried, and it was stopped. And his body was transferred to Chicago in a box on the condition that it should never be open. And when Emmett Till got her son's remains in that box, she defied white man's law, Caesar's law, and opened up the box, and she found to her horror what happened to her son. The only way they could identify Emmett Till's body was by the ring with the initial LT, which once belonged to his deceased father, Lewis Till, who was killed during World War II. He actually was hanged during World War II by the United States Army, and we'll get into that later on as well. So Emmett Till had to make a decision. She decided to do an open casket of her son to let the world see how horrible racism and white supremacy is to black people. So she made this bold and brave decision to have an open casket funeral. And it's crazy because the photos went into Jet magazine and it went throughout the country. And that's why it's so important to have a black media, because I don't know if the New York Times or even the Chicago Tribune or LA Times, any of those papers would have did the same thing as the black media did for that story. You actually had a race beat where the black media would cover stories that were relative or related to the black experience in America that would not normally get covered by the quote-unquote white mainstream media because of its lack of interest for white folk, or supposed lack of interest for white folk. So she had the open casket, big funeral, thousands, tens of thousands of folks saw the body. Some people say they could smell the stench of the body blocks away, which is interesting, and it's sad. But you can see pictures, like once you see that picture, like once I saw the picture when I was a little kid, it stayed in my mind. So you had this black boy get killed, Emmett Till. They had the trial of the brother Roy Bryant and J.W. Malum. They faced trial in September. They were found not guilty by a jury of their peers. And then they end up confessing to the murder in a Look magazine with renowned journalist and author William Bradford Huey interviewing them. I believe they were paid, I want to say they were paid $100,000, I think. You can look all this up. Don't take my word for it, but I'm just trying to relay some information to put things in context. So they were paid a lot of money for that time to confess that they killed Emmett Till and the reason why they killed Emmett Till. And once they did that, they became pariahs of the community, because it was the black folks that supported their store, or Bryant's grocery store. And then when black folks found out that they confessed and all this other stuff, they stopped going to the store. So they lost their business, their once thriving business. And then the Bryant and his brother Malum was ostracized by the white community, because, the thing about it is the white folks everybody knew basically that they were guilty as hell. But though I guess the white power structure at the time did not like to be criticized by quote unquote outside agitators. They felt like it was Mississippi versus the world. Like, they saying, well, we know these guys guilty, but y'all trying to make us look all bad like we barbarians and savages. So they said, the hell with that, we stick together, we're going to find these boys not guilty, and that'd be the end of it. But that was the end of it, because once they confessed, then they had to come to, these guys, we let them off, we gave them another chance, now these fools going to embarrass us like this. So they got ostracized by the white community, and they got ostracized by the black community, and they had to leave, to make ends meet. So, Emmett Till, she went down there with Congressman Charles Diggs, black congressman from Michigan, and all that, during the trial, like I said, this woman was so brave. to even go down there because she knew she was not going to get justice. People knew. She's from Mississippi. She knew how these things work. And to Moses' right credit for him to have the courage back in the 1950s to testify against the white man. He pointed out in court, in Sumner Courthouse down in Mississippi, September 55, there they be. I don't know if he said like there they be, but he pointed to the white man who was responsible for killing and lynching his grandnephew. And he had to leave shortly thereafter, but he had that courage. So people call him a coward all they want to. But, you got to put things in proper context. And, the mom stayed with Dr. T.R.M. Howard in Mound Bayou, Mississippi, in his, palatial home, round-the-clock security. They believe in armed struggle down in Mississippi. And that's another misconception about the movement. Because folks think that Dr. King down there was nonviolent. That's a lie. Dr. King had armed security detail. When he was doing the March Against Fear, when James Meredith got shot on Highway 51 down there in Mississippi, he continued to march, but he had the Deacons for Defense as his armed security detail from Bogalusa, Louisiana. Deacons for Defense was a forerunner to the Black Panther Party for self-defense. And so that was his armed security detail. Matter of fact, the day that Dr. King got killed was the day that he did not have armed security detail of black detectives for the Memphis Police Department. Because normally when Dr. King came to Memphis, he had armed security detail of some of the best black detectives from the Memphis Police Department. And that's another story in itself. So I want to get people to understand why it's so important that We All Be platforms, like We All Be, exist. Because we're trying to give you that vitamin supplements that you're not getting through your regular meal of news media digestion. And also you can look at all this stuff I'm telling you up. I'm not, telling you a tall tale. They believed in armed struggle. So, matter of fact, Dr. T.R.M. Howard, who was named after Teddy Roosevelt of all people, was a big game hunter. So he might have would have killed a Cecil the lion back in the day. He's going big hunting game safaris up in Africa and India, places like that. So he's a very fascinating brother who's been forgotten about for whatever reason. Also, Dr. T.R.M. Howard was one of the first black leaders of renown to raise money for the widow and family of Malcolm X when he was assassinated. Because Malcolm would come to Chicago and he would get money from people like Dr. Howard to help in his, in his struggle and what he was trying to do for black people. And also, Dr. T.R.M. Howard was a mentor to Reverend Jesse Jackson. He actually gave him the seed money to start Operation Push Rainbow Coalition. He had Jesse Jackson over in his home, in his mansion in Chicago, when he moved to Chicago from Mississippi shortly thereafter the Emmett Till situation. He gave Jesse Jackson the seed money to start Rainbow Push Coalition. And also, he was a mentor and friend to Harold Washington, the first black mayor of Chicago. So Dr. Howard was a guy that we need to know about, and there's certain reasons why he's not known about. And I interviewed Dr. Linda Beto, who wrote a great book about Dr. Howard that y'all should check out, called The Black Maverick, that came out about 5 years ago. And I'll upload the whole interview soon to We All Be TV. But I say all this to say that Dr. Howard was very fascinated that he extended his condolences as well as his home and his protection to Sister Emmett Till Mobley when she was down there for her son's killer's trial. She knew it was a farce anyway. It was none but theater. And so, but she felt protected, very protected by Dr. Howard. But Dr. Howard also, like I said, he financed a private investigation to find out the people who were involved in the Emmett Till situation. And also he blasted J. Edgar Hoover and the FBI. He wrote a letter, condemning them for being basically bullshit artists. Like, you're not taking this case seriously. Black lives did matter back in 1955, according to Dr. T.R.M. Howard. And they put him on the radar of the FBI. He was one of J. Edgar Hoover's enemies from that point on, when he raised his voice. And he was a proud black Republican. He supported Eisenhower and all that stuff. And that's another story in itself. But anyway, so in the trial, what came out in the trial was that Louis Till, Emmett's father, was a war criminal, I guess. They say he was a war criminal that was hanged for killing an Italian woman and raping 2 other women. So his father was a convicted murderer and a rapist. So the reason why they came out, it was classified information. But the ultimate white supremacists, the U.S. senators from Mississippi, James Eastland and John Stennis was able to get classified files from the Pentagon and leak them to the media. You know, and so they're trying to say that if Emmett Till's father was a convicted murderer and rapist, that means the fruit doesn't fall too far for the tree. So the victim becomes a double victim of not only losing his life, but also of character assassination. Does this sound familiar, anybody? Do y'all understand? You guys see the patterns emerging. I just talked about how they use the media to assassinate the character of the victim. So black people in the system of white supremacy, we are not allowed to be victims, no matter how inhumane and gross and this is really disturbing the crime committed against our people. We're not allowed because, you know, we don't meet a certain standard to get empathy or compassion from the white supremacist system. So I just want y'all to understand what's at play, because a lot of times we're not really students of history, and really history is a form of propaganda that's supported by the state, because whoever get to tell the story, whoever gets to control the narrative, that's a form of propaganda. Like whether it be documentaries, movies, books, whatever. If you have, you know, institutions that support a certain narrative and eliminate other narratives, then what is that? You know, so that's why it's so important. Like I said, you go research this on your own, and research in and of itself is its own reward. You know, knowledge of self, knowledge of whatever. Sometimes you got to do that. But what I find in this period, which is unfortunate, that we got all this information and technology at our disposal, we don't do a lot of research. Like I interview people that's involved in this stuff, so I do my part in terms of creating resources and creating material to support this point of view. And I will do a job of this tweeting this stuff out. But just go to We All Be TV and We All Be TV too. So you got youtube.com/We All Be TV. That's We All Be TV, one word. Then you got We All Be TV 2 with the number 2 at the end. So you go to those places, you can see my interviews with the Emmett Till stuff. It's very fascinating stuff. So you gotta understand too, because they said, you know, Louis Till, he's buried over in France in a section of a American cemetery over in France that's reserved for convicted criminals who used to wear the uniform. So he's buried over there. Been buried over there since July the 2nd, 1945. And 10 years later, his son is killed August 28th, 1955 in Mississippi. And so the only way they could identify Emmett Till's body, once again, was by his ring from his late father, Louis Till. And even then, you know, people talk about false flags and stuff. I know people like when Mike Brown, he really died. Even what happened in Virginia a couple of days ago, are these people really dead or false flags? Well, you had your own thing going on with conspiracy theories. They didn't have Twitter and social media and Facebook and all that stuff back in 1955, but they did have a media that was interested more in printing lies and unprovable things than printing the truth and facts. So, you know, the lawyers for the killers of Emmett Till, they were saying that the body that was found in the Tallahatchie River wasn't Emmett Till, that it was that of an older person. So they were saying that Emmett Till actually got away, that they didn't kill Emmett Till, he actually escaped, and that this was a big prank. Does that sound familiar? You know, even when the 3 civil rights workers, Swerner, Cheney, and Goodman, went missing during Freedom Summer 1964, the local power structures, the white power structures, and all them claimed, hey, these guys are playing a prank. You know, they're playing, they up north somewhere laughing at us, looking like fools. See, I always say that type of stuff. These people always playing pranks. Nobody really gets killed. Nobody dies. Nothing happened. There's no crime. No crime. Well, they were trying to say that the body they found in Tallahatchie River was not Emmett Till, was that of an older person. And also, you gotta understand his body, he was beaten up severely before he was dumped into the Tallahatchie River. And he was shot in the head. So in that condition, the body would, you know, basically decompose faster than normal, I guess. Because, you know, it was all beat up, battered like a piece of steak. You know, so it took to 2005 when his body was exhumed by the FBI to prove with DNA testing that indeed that was 14-year-old Emmett Till who was killed in Mississippi, in Monday, Mississippi, back in 1955. So it took him to 2005 because of what, Keith Beauchamp with his documentary about Emmett Till, which featured Emmett Till right before she passed, heavily in the documentary, talking about this situation. They got the FBI to actually exhume his body and to do DNA testing to prove that indeed he was Emmett Till buried in that grave. So anyway, so like I said, this started the modern day civil rights movement. And we talked about the character assassination was done by the United States government, really, to discredit, what happened to Emmett Till. So y'all try to keep on thinking that Black Lives Matter. And I got to say, no, not in a system of white supremacy racism. You paying taxes for your oppression and repression. So, because it's funny because I remember when Mike Brown happened, people say y'all trying to make him like he's Emmett Till, and he's exactly like Emmett Till, because he can't be innocent regardless, because he's a young black man who was killed. Trayvon Martin can never be innocent. Nobody is never ever innocent if you're a young black male. There is no sympathy or no compassion for young black men in this system. And black folks trip me out, especially older black people, when they talk about, well, why the young people act this way, because you didn't teach them anything of worth. You did not provide them knowledge yourself. See, we do it ass backwards in this system. You blame the newbies. It's like if you go into sports, nobody blames the rookie for the state of the league. If you a pro player in your first year, ain't nobody gonna say, well, it's all your fault that our institution is a mess that's corrupt. No, you make rookie mistakes. So in the black psyche in this system, we blame the babies, we blame the rookies for the mistakes of the veterans, of the pros. You see what I'm saying? I know it sounds like, just understand what I'm saying. You the parent, that's the child. You ain't provided any type of standards or rules or anything for the child to be able to compete, to be able to understand, to be able to navigate this system. You keep on telling our kids, we tell our black children that race doesn't matter, that, there are good white people, all this stuff, yada, yada, but you never tell them how great they are. You never teach them knowledge yourself. Because a lot of times you don't know how great you are because you don't do the research. That's not been in your education system. And this is not an education system. This is an indoctrination system. Because it does not teach you who you are. After 12, 13 years of school, you have no idea who you are and where you came from. You have ideas that, white people are great because this and that, whatever they told you in your textbook. White people, they the presidents, they the titans of industry. But they never tell you the people behind the scenes. Like I always tell people, behind every great white man is a great black mentor that he stole from. That's how I see it. And history backs me up. So with that said, it's a lot of confusion right now. So I remember when I was talking to people about Mike Brown thing, I said, they call Emmett Till a thug too. They call him a thug too. It's like, if you look at, like the Montgomery bus boycott, the 60th anniversary is coming up on that, right? And if you look at that, you had several people, black men and women, who refused to remove from their bus seat. You have like a famous example of Claudette Colvin, the young sister who refused to move from her bus seat on the bus, but because she wasn't the right complexion and whatever reasons, then by that time things started, because she had a quote unquote, according to them, an attitude problem. You know how people write you off in history. This is the reason why we couldn't use Claudette Colvin versus Rosa Parks, who was the NAACP secretary at the time, who went to the Highlander School for activism, and she had the right complexion, to pull it off, the right background. She, she's very attractive to the black middle class. So with Claudette Colvin, she was a sassy 15-year-old kid, soon to be teenage mom. So we didn't want her, for this. See, this is how political this shit is. This is how political everything is. Because like I tell people all the time, the NAACP, they did a lot of great things in terms of, civil litigation and all this stuff, civil rights. But the NAACP was not created for black liberation. Let me repeat this once again. The NAACP was not created for black liberation. It was created for assimilation and integration. That's why they did the things they did. You look at 100 years ago, we lost Booker T. Washington. Booker T. Washington, whether you like him or not, And you got to ask yourself, why don't you like him, or why don't you understand what he actually did? Because we don't research, we don't seek out the information for ourselves. Booker T. Washington, he told black folks, do for self. Now, we associate that with the Nation of Islam, with Elijah Muhammad, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad and them. He's told black folks to do for self. Don't worry about trying to be with white people. Do for self. Build up your own institutions. Create your own communities. Create your own wealth. That's the blueprint for liberation. Because once you build up your own stuff and invest in self and do for self, then everybody else will respect you. But now we find ourselves in a begging position. We're trying to convince presidential candidates that Black Lives Matter. Black lives don't matter unless you can write checks that don't bounce. So you got to think about this. We have basically played ourselves for the last 50 years. It's never been about integration. If you want black liberation, it's always been about investing in black people, investing in yourself, do for self. And also, not only doing for self, but also protect yourself. Because, you're dealing with a system that's trying to deny you your humanity and stuff like that. You got to be gangster with it. Like Israel, whatever you might say about the Zionists and all this other stuff, they gangster about theirs. They're protecting their homeland. They're protecting their interests by any means necessary. Whether it be with firepower, whether it be with nuclear weapons, they're going to protect their interests. See, what happened with us with Rosewood and Black Wall Street, and even some other places that's not really mentioned like it should be, is the fact that we thought that the white supremacists will always have our best interests. We studied the Constitution. We always want to talk about the Constitution. We always talk about civil liberties and all this stuff. But if a system is built not to protect your own best interests, why do you rely on that system for protection? You got to protect your own self-interest. You got to create your own militias. It's like, for example, when John Brown raided Harper's Ferry back on October 16th, 1859, I believe. The white folks saw what he did. Although he might have quote unquote failed, he didn't live, he even lost his son or two, and he ended up getting hanged at the gallows. The white folks understood in the South that, hey, the Civil War is coming. It's not, it might come, it may not come. It's like when people talk about the race war, I think it's kind of silly. People talking about, well, they're trying to make a race war. We're already in a war. It's been a race war. But the way they fight it now is so sophisticated. It's sophisticated, but it's always been a race war, because a race has always been a great race war. I mean, race for resources, race for leverage and all this other stuff. But anyway, the white folks saw the writing on the wall and they started doing their militias. They started forming militias throughout the South. That's why the South was so prepared when that Fort Sumter thing came around. When April 12th, 1861, when the attack on Fort Sumter happened in the Charleston Harbor. That's why the South was so prepared to secede. I mean, Jefferson Davis, the president of the Confederate States, he was the former Secretary of War under Franklin Pierce. Judah P. Benjamin, the first black Jewish senator from Louisiana, finances, he was the vice president of the Confederacy, among other titles. So they was already prepared to fight. They had their militias in order. Their generals came out of schools like West Point. You got Robert E. Lee and Stonewall Jackson, Joshua Johnson, all these guys. You had people like, in Memphis area, Nathan Bedford Forrest, the first Grand Wizard of the KKK. He didn't go to no military schools, but yet his tactics that he did as a cavalry leader is still studied in military academies and schools throughout the world. And he raised his own army for the South. He was a millionaire. So he paid his way. So they was already prepared. But then you look at black people, fast forward, like we're at the 10th anniversary of Katrina, and you see what's going on with black folks with Trayvon Martin, Mike Brown, Jenna Six. Take your black tragedy pick. And when they insert here, black folks still have not learned how to do for self, how to protect their interests, how to protect their family. We still are dependent on white supremacists to have some type of feelings of compassion and empathy for our plight. And they don't have it. They don't have that type of compassion and sympathy for you. You must do for self. So we had that in Booker T. Washington. and he was killed. And I had a sister on. She had a theory about who and why Booker T. Washington was killed. You can look in our archives on We All Be TV for that. But what I'm saying is, Booker T. Washington was the mentor for one Marcus Mosiah Garvey, who was our greatest black mass leader that we ever produced. Nobody come close to Marcus Mosiah Garvey. Nobody. No Farrakhan, no Elijah Muhammad, no Malcolm, no King. As a matter of fact, you look at Booker T. Washington, see, you judge a tree by the fruit it bears. Like you look at the NFL, black folks love football and shit. Look at the coaching tree. Bill Parcells produced Bill Belichick, the coach for the New England Patriots. He started on the Bill Parcells. You look at Tony Dungy, produced Mike Tomlin, the Pittsburgh Steelers coach. He started under Tony Dungy when he was at Tampa Bay. So what I'm saying is, the greatness of a tree is recognized through the fruit that it bears. So Marcus Garvey was writing Booker T. Washington from Jamaica because he wanted to start an organization like Tuskegee. As a matter of fact, one of the main reasons why Marcus Garvey came to America was to meet his mentor, Booker T. Washington, but he was dead by the time. Marcus Garvey was also interested in working at Tuskegee to learn under his mentor how to build their organization. Marcus Garvey even wanted to work at the NAACP at one time, but he was turned away, I believe, by Du Bois and other people of their organization. Marcus Garvey was given his first major speech in America. His first speech was made possible by another black leader of note, A. Philip Randolph of the Pullman Porters fame. A. Philip Randolph arranged for Marcus Garvey to give his first speech in New York City when he came over here. So Marcus Garvey came over here right after Booker T. Washington died under mysterious circumstances. But since this time, 100 years later, we was much closer to realizing our power as black people back in 1915 than we are in 2015. Some 40 some years after the quote unquote great civil rights movement. And really these, celebration, these anniversaries, Voting Rights Act, which they really about to get rid of, is really interesting because they let you know you're not a citizen. When if you born in America, you need a special amendment or whatever, some shit to prove that you can vote, and white folks take that for granted. So how can white folks identify with your plight when they are born in this country and they already had it because they're white? Whereas you as a black person, you didn't even have that right, even though you was here before a lot of these white people that came over here to vote. And you still might not have that right because the way they take it away from you through the prison industry complex. They never abolished slavery. The 13th Amendment is a farce because we got private prisons. And there's a lot of stuff going on with our people in prisons, which is a joke, but we not own our game. We're not organized. And really, this period right now in American history, when they look on this period for black folks, this was an L for us. We was not organized. Like everybody from the LGBTQ community to white women to the immigrant movement, they all learned the blueprint from us, from the civil rights movements, how we did boycotts and things of that nature, how we organized, how we created organization, how we lobby for ourselves. But black folks have not learned that because we don't study our history. And you could tell that right now in the way that there's an intergenerational breakdown where, you look at the movements like Black Lives Matter, even in Ferguson, a lot of these cats, they're repeating the same mistakes that some of the elders did 50, 40 years ago. But yet they're not trying to get that elder insight. Because like a lot of things we're doing now, it's not going to work. Singing, protesting, all that stuff. It's just like, people look at that as vacation. You look at it as holiday. You marching in the street. That is nothing but a propaganda thing to get people to pay attention. Now, what is the plan? What is the strategy? That's not really, because I even I went to Ferguson for the 1 year anniversary. We was in the area, me and my mom. And it's like, a year later, all people going to do is just hang out in the streets. Hands up, don't shoot. My blackness is not a weapon. Your blackness is a weapon. See, we talk the talk of a victim. You say my blackness is not a weapon. Black lives matter. You try to convince yourself that you do matter. We have such a low self-esteem as a collective. And that's why Marcus Garvey was so dangerous, because of the fact that he knew he must encourage his people before they could do anything of note. They must believe in themselves. You must believe in yourself. You must have confidence before the race start. And he understood that. He understood that. That's why he understood the power of media and publishing and pushing that out there. You know, we must believe in ourselves. We must believe that we can achieve. Up you mighty race and accomplish what you will. See, we don't believe in ourselves. Like Muhammad Ali, when he was Cassius Clay, you know, he was fighting Sonny Liston. Before he could fight Sonny Liston, he talking about how afraid he was of the Big Bear, known as Sonny Liston, the mob enforcer. I mean, Sonny Liston is an underrated heavyweight. He's one of the toughest heavyweights of all time. You know, and he was afraid of him. But he had to psych himself into wanting to defeat Sonny Liston. He psyched himself into it. He had to believe in himself when nobody else believed he could beat Sonny Liston. He had to start believing he could do it before he could do it. And black folks, we must start to believe in ourselves that we could break away from this madness and do for self. Do for self. Because racism and white supremacy only becomes a problem when you got to deal with white people. See, racism and white supremacy, these are white folks' problems. That has nothing to do with black people. But black folks still want to be cannon fodder for a system that don't respect them. That's our problem as a people. So Marcus Garvey was a threat to the system because he wanted black folks to believe in themselves, and black folks started to believe in themselves. He had millions of followers throughout the world. He didn't have no social media presence. He wasn't on the radio every day, but he was giving people something they could believe in. And before you have a Nation of Islam, you had to have a United Negro Improvement Association. So before you had a Nation of Islam and all this other stuff, you had to have a United Negro Improvement Association. And even before you had the UNIA, you had to have Tuskegee, because that was his mentor. So without that, there'd be no black power. So black power, really, Booker T. Washington was black power. We thought he was an Uncle Tom, but nah, he knew how the white man worked. He got to understand. You know, his father was white. It's kind of like Robert Church Sr., the first black millionaire of the South. His father was white, was well-known and respected white man, white businessman from Mississippi, who, you know, he grew up with his father going up and down the Mississippi River. He understood the psychology and the psyche of white folk in America. Same thing with Booker T. Washington. He understood the psychology and psyche of white folk in America. That's why he was able to do that compromise speech in Atlanta back in 1895. But what I'm saying is a lot of us don't understand this psyche. See, he understood firsthand. You got to understand, you had black folks getting lynched every day and day and a half in the South. There's that guy, black folks getting killed by police every 28 hours, supposedly. But yeah, we still haven't learned. We still want to be begging them and all this other shit. You know, it ain't about begging no more. Even with, you look at the justice or else, the hashtag social justice thing that's going on. Really, you don't have to go to Washington, D.C. in October. We don't really have to meet, because like 20 years later, we still don't control any type of black-owned mass transportation system. Where are all the black-owned hotels? In 20 years' time, it's like when Prince said we did that free concert right after the Freddie Gray riots in Baltimore. He said, the next time I want to come to Baltimore, I want to stay in a black-owned hotel. 20 years later, where are the black-owned hotels and black-owned transportation systems? I mean, it was a white dude that just created Uber. I mean, black folks, we don't have to do that. We don't have any ideas that we can create, because this system works for the entrepreneur. It's not for the worker. The workers are meant to be exploited like resources that they are. The system is set up for the entrepreneur. It's a gaming system. You know, it's not for the employee, it's for the employer. See, the problem with the employee is not that they don't work hard. It's that in this system, the harder you work, the poorer you are. The people on top don't work as hard as people on the bottom. But they are rewarded because they create an infrastructure. They create a system for you to stay busy. You stay busy, but for them, it's productive. See, you punching the clock. See, a job is not designed for you to be rich or wealthy. Like they said, a job is just over broke. A job is not designed for a person to become wealthy. Ideas are designed for you to become wealthy. How you implement ideas, how you get people to buy into your idea. Like, for example, I look at Microsoft. You look at Bill Gates. You know, everybody who started out with Bill Gates so many, like 40 years ago, whatever, they might not be as wealthy as Bill Gates, but they wealthy. You know, Steve Ballmer was able to buy the damn Clippers for a couple of billion, right? And he was one of Bill Gates' boys, and you know, a couple of people like his partner owns the Paul Allen owns the Seahawks and stuff. I think the Mariners and stuff too. But what I'm saying is, you look at how it's set up in the black community with the black church. You know, you look at the people who started out with a mega minister. I ain't gonna say their names, but think about the black mega preachers, right? When they first started out in those storefronts, How many of those people you think years later are eating good with them, are eating steak and you know and sipping champagne, not worrying about how to pay the light bill or their mortgage? How many other folks you think that started out with those mega ministers today are well off, versus somebody who started with Fred Smith when he first started FedEx, or somebody who started with Bill Gates when he first started Microsoft, or somebody who started with Sam Walton when he first started Walmart? So this, even like you look at Colonel Sanders when he first started KFC. Now Colonel Sanders was about 64, 65 years old. Used like $100 and something from his Social Security check to start, will become known as one of the most successful fast food franchises in history. Kentucky Fried Chicken on KFC. One of his proteges was Dave Thomas, who ended up becoming the founder of Wendy's. Coaching tree, your tree. The greatness of a tree is known by the fruit it produces. So Colonel Sanders produced Dave Thomas. He started off selling chicken, and before he started selling burgers. So this is what I'm saying. With black people, we always looking for something where everything we need really resides in us. We just gotta believe in ourselves to manifest a different reality, a different paradigm. So Marcus Garvey, he understood the power of people believing in themselves. Muhammad Ali understood the power of him believing in himself to overcome Sonny Liston. So really, it starts with confidence. And you're not going to get any confidence if you don't know any knowledge yourself about who you are. So knowledge yourself is very important. So I'm not going to get out. I said, damn, I'll go out. Let's go back to Emmett Till and what's going on right now. Like I said, that made him a victim double times. Like, he was killed in a physical sense. And then they tried to kill his character. But it didn't work like that because we had the civil rights movement. And unfortunately, I think the aims of the civil rights movement was off. Like Dr. King figured it out. He said we're integrating into a burning house because black people have confused assimilation for integration. So yeah, I have no problem with integration, because when you integrate, that means that you compete with other groups and people as equals. But when you assimilate, you lose your identity. You lose your knowledge yourself. And really you lose because you start, getting assimilated into the quote unquote, some people call it a dominant society. And I don't think it's real dominant, but for lack of a better phrase at this point, we call it a dominant society. So you lose your voice, you lose your identity when you integrate into a system. Not integrate, but assimilate into a system that don't really respect your humanity, because you're not allowed to keep your knowledge yourself or your identity. Because this system set up for identity politics. Your identity politics is tied into your economics and your education, into your culture. If you lose your identity, you lose everything. You have no footing in the system. You can't compete from a strong position. And this is why we as a people are weak right now, because we're not competing from a strong position. Because we forfeit our identity just for acceptance. And just because they accept you don't mean they respect you. So now that's where we're at right now. So I got into this long tangent, and I'm sorry about that. But let me go back to Emmett Till and all this stuff and how it relates to right now. Because you got the situation that just happened in Virginia, in Southern Virginia. A brother named Vesta Flanagan, a.k.a. Bryce Williams, the former news reporter who allegedly killed, a news reporter and a cameraman from his old job while they was live TV, and injured a Chamber of Commerce woman down there at Smith Lake Mountain, I believe. But I think all this is fascinating to me because, they're trying to pick this guy like he's Nat Turner or somebody, or he's the next comment of Nat Turner. And now that he went from next comment of Nat Turner to a crazy man, he's a black supremacist. He said the reason why he did, allegedly what he did in the manifesto, was because what happened in Charleston with Mother Emanuel, with the 9 black lives stolen by Dylan Roof, white supremacist Dylan Roof. And then that's suspect if he did it by himself, if he did it at all. But I mean, all this stuff, all this confusion, right? It's Black August. This is around the time, also Nat Turner's rebellion happened in Southampton, Virginia, Southern Virginia, back in August of 1831. So is this a coincidence, that this happened in Southern Virginia? And Virginia is very racist, especially Southern Virginia. It's like a tale of two Virginias. Like you got, Northern Virginia near DC area, then you got Southern Virginia, and that's like the dirty, genteel South. That's I got a friend. He said it's the great white man belt. The great white man of history belt. That's the Madison and Jefferson and Washington, all them guys. And then you got the Civil War people like Stonewall and Robert E. Lee. But anyway, Southern Virginia is interesting. Virginia is a pretty state, but I don't like Virginia. I hate driving through Virginia because of traffic. It is because speed. Speed traps. I remember I got a ticket about a couple of years ago. It cost me a little bit over $300, a speeding ticket in Montgomery County, which is near the scene of the crime, whatever. But the problem is, the paraphrase Neely Fuller in that situation. If you don't understand what white supremacy is and how it works, then everything else would just confuse you. I think, unfortunately, with brother Bryce Williams, aka Vester Flanagan, was that he was confused by a lot of stuff. He was very confused because he didn't understand the system he was in. Because, first of all, the EEOC, when was the last time their organization ever helped any black person get some type of justice when it came to economic and employment discrimination? See, the problem with white supremacy is you cannot out them. You cannot call them racist. You cannot call them white supremacists. Because once you say, well, they discriminate against me racially, they make it so hard for you to prove it, because the burden of proof is on the person who filed the complaint. And once you say, I experienced on the job racism, then they basically said, well, we're not going to even take you seriously because you call it racism. And they could say, well, it's all in your head. Because with white supremacy, it's a name game. Call it something else. Call it something else, but don't call it what it really is. Let me say that once again. In white supremacy, you got to call what it actually is something else. Because when you call it for what it is, they won't take you seriously. Like when you say racism is racism, like, well, how can you prove that, buddy? Is that possible? Then, I don't like the fact, when you look at, well, people don't understand. Like, I saw the press conference with Jeff Marks, the newsman director, whatever he was, at that news station that Flanagan used to work at. If you look at everybody who was at that press conference, majority of the people there were white people. And I think they might have had one or two token Negroes. I saw, but this majority is white people. And like I said, when you got a setting like that, white folks don't have to acknowledge you at all. They could just ignore you. They could just neglect you, because why should they have to acknowledge you when you the one or two people of color in the room? You have no leverage. You just their token. No matter how accomplished or talented that you are, you're just their token. You're not to be heard. You're not even to be seen at some points. You only are taken seriously when they want to take you seriously. So you have no leverage. So they can say, well, we're not racist. And the majority of them will agree because they don't see themselves as being racist. Because they are comfortable. They're not in an uncomfortable situation. Whereas you, as the lone black person, you are always in a potential tenuous situation. Because you outnumbered. You always outnumbered. You always outgunned. So I remember somebody was saying, that Cornel West was on CNN, I think the day after it happened. And I like what he did, because the lady was trying to say, well, don't you agree he was mentally ill? He said, well, he just snapped. Well, for what we know, he just snapped. And everybody got a breaking point. And that's true. Everybody do have a breaking point. Black folks, believe it or not, we do have breaking points. But what we don't understand is racism, white supremacy is not an illness. It's not a sickness. But what it does to black folks, it makes us sick. It makes us ill. A lot of our diseases that we deal with, a lot of our mental problems that we have, is from being in contact with this system that do not respect our black humanity. They do not take us seriously. They treat us like little kids, regardless if we're 8 years old or 80 years old. So this is a problem. And this is what he encountered, but he didn't understand what he was going through, because he wanted to be accepted. He wanted to try to assimilate. But regardless of whatever he did and didn't do, he was never going to be accepted, by this system of white supremacy racism. It is what it is. It is what it is, And unfortunately, he was confused about what was going on, and then he snapped, supposedly, And people say this is a false flag. Don't mean it didn't happen. It could be a conspiracy behind it. Don't mean it didn't happen. Something happened in that area. And it's funny how the media focus on certain things, because so many stories that don't get amplified by the media. That there are some terrible stories that happen to people in this world, and nobody ever finds out about it. If they ever do, it might be years later. Like even with, we got the anniversary of the Lennon Lacey thing, which happened around August 28th of all things too. Lennon Lacey, a young black man, football player, was 17 years old, who was found hanging from a swing set in the middle of a trailer park community, a white trailer park community in rural North Carolina. He had on shoes that were too small for his feet. He had on some brand new Air Jordans. Then they put on some other shoes that were too small for his feet. He had on different clothes. When they found him hanging, they didn't do any crime scene photos. The coroner was not allowed by the TBI, not the TBI, but the Bureau of Investigation for North Carolina to take pictures of the crime scene. The first autopsy results were suspect. They brought in a second specialist that thought it was murder. And the thing about Lennon Lacey, he was a football player. He's 17 years old. He got killed right before his first game of the season. It tried like he was suicidal, but from all accounts, it seemed like he was looking forward to playing the first game of football because he was working out. He wanted to play pro. He was working out. He was just training the whole summer for that moment in order to start as a linebacker for his team. I think he was sick the year before, so he couldn't play football. So what I'm saying is, they passed off as suicide, and it just doesn't add up. And also, he was dating a 31-year-old white woman at the time, which is kind of interesting. But the age of consent in North Carolina is 16. But he was dating this 31-year-old white lady with kids who was estranged from her husband in Illinois. She just moved to the area, and she said she loved him, but she said they got some racial threats for dating, and his mom did not approve of him dating this older lady, especially a white woman in that part of the South of North Carolina. But the NAACP, led by the state's president of North Carolina, Reverend William Barber, who I got a lot of respect for, they tried to do what they could do, to get some justice, but you're not gonna get no justice. It is quite obvious to me that the guy was murdered, but yet they're gonna say it's a suicide, and yet we're gonna accept it. Another slap in our face. And a year later, nothing's been done. Just like with Otis Bird and Vicksburg, just like Frederick Carter and Greenwood in 2010. We can't get no justice. And all this posing that we do on social media is ridiculous. Because a lot of things that we won't have to do, it's not going to be seen on cameras. And it's not going to be, celebrated. You just got to do the dirty work. In terms of, we got to start building some institutions. We got to start getting some type of control and self-respect back over what we're trying to do. And it's difficult. It's difficult, but the ancestors have left us a blueprint. We don't need to reinvent the wheel. The stuff that we need to do is already out there. It's been proven throughout history to work. You just got to do the hard work. You got to do what it takes. And sometimes we don't be having no TV program specials and no awards given for the work that needs to be done. It just needs to be done. And we need to teach the generations coming up the truth and prepare them in a better way. Because this is a global economy. We're in a very competitive environment. And it's bigger than just your block, just your hood, just your project. It's bigger than that. It's bigger than what we think it could be bigger. It's way bigger than what we can even comprehend at sometimes. And also with Darius Stewart, like what they're doing right now with Darius is a joke. Like I talked about the Emmett Till thing earlier. I think it's important now. Darius Stewart is a young man who was killed by the police at a black church on black church grounds, July 17th, 2015, in Memphis, Tennessee. And it's kind of strange because Minister Farrakhan, he came to Memphis to try to, promote his Justice or Else Million Man March anniversary event in October the 10th, 2015. He brought up Darrius Stewart several times in his address to a sold out, and sold out, it was packed, standing room only venue, not just several hundred like Commercial Appeal said, but standing room only with lines stretched around blocks, around the Cannon Center. He addressed the issue about Darrius Stewart and about police brutality. But the media has basically been, the local media here, saying it's been like really just doing character assassination of brother Darrius Stewart, similar to what they did to Emmett Till. Because now what the media is saying now is that Darrius Stewart was a child molester who molested his cousin and his cousin friend when they were 4 and 5 years old back in 2009 when he was 13. See, what's funny about the news is when they first reported that he was, allegedly involved in some type of sexual situation with his cousin and his cousin friend, it made it sound like these people were like 12 years old and he was about 13. It's back in 2009. Because what they're doing, they're trying to justify why Officer Connor Schilling killed this man. Because what people don't understand, and this is why it's so important to have platforms like We All Be. Because I'm keep on repeating this to y'all, make y'all understand that whatever happened in his past had nothing to do with what happened on July 17, 2015. His civil and human rights were violated on July 17th, 2015. So what happened back in 2009 should have been addressed in court. But the problem with that is, why wasn't that addressed in 2009 when the charges or the situation was first brought up by his auntie, Irene McKinney? So there's a family falling out over this because Irene McKinney reported to Fox 13 News Memphis. She did an interview. I can't find this interview anywhere. It's like the video is non-existent. Like they're not posting it. But she was allegedly interviewed by a reporter for Fox 13 News Memphis, and she gave the details of what happened back in 2009. But my thing was, he was 13. Why wasn't this addressed in juvenile court? Why put out a warrant for his arrest June 30th of 2015, and then July 17, 2015, he lay dead on church grounds under mysterious circumstances? Because my understanding from that night was he was a passenger in a traffic stop. He didn't have his ID on him, but the car was pulled over for a busted headlight or tail light or something. And the cop started checking, I guess, the people in the car besides the driver. It's a traffic stop, people. Yeah, he was curious about Darrius Stewart. He didn't have his ID on him. So he allowed the driver of the car to leave to get Darius' ID and proper information, because they stayed not too far away from the traffic stop. So Darius got out the car. He was put in the back of Officer Schilling's patrol car. He was driven up the street on church grounds. Officer Schilling alleged that Darius refused to be handcuffed. Think about it. Okay, he got the guy in his patrol car, drive him up the street with no handcuffs on from a traffic stop. What is this all about? He has no ID on him at the time. So Officer Schilling alleged that when he tried to put the handcuffs on Darius, that Darius fought him. So you got a 25-second video footage from a camera phone showing them on the ground, that showing Officer Schilling really having the best of Darrius Stewart. Darius, from my understanding, was about 5'4", 5'6", maybe weighed between 120, 130 pounds, and he was asthmatic. Officer Schilling was over 6 feet tall and 200 pounds. So you think who got the upper hand in that situation? So anyway, they were struggling on church grounds on New Direction Church on Winchester. Eyewitness had about 25 seconds of footage, and a little bit after that, Officer Schilling pulled out his gun and fired several shots into Darrius Stewart, which eventually killed him. And this Officer Schilling was known to have issues. Like, he was arrested in South Haven for doing a high-speed chase of his girlfriend, I guess. And also he was accused of beating up this black female motorist during a traffic stop about 2 years ago. And he got off on both charges because of the South Haven speeding incident, chasing his girlfriend. The cop who arrested him did not show up in court several times. And I'm trying to figure out, because Connor Schilling is from Mississippi, and Darius is originally from Mississippi as well. I believe he's from Greenwood. So they both from Mississippi. I'm trying to figure out if the cop didn't show up in court to testify against Officer Schilling because of their connection. It's just all types of weird stuff. But the news ain't even asking questions about why would an officer drive a young man like this, who was just a passenger in the traffic stop, why would he drive him away from the traffic stop scene with no handcuffs on his back of his patrol car, and then do what he did and end up that led to his death? Because his mom and the friend, who the driver, they came back with the information they saw Darius lying on the ground, dead or dying. And then the mom was told some obscene stuff about officer to get your ass back. And she got this recorded. Somebody recorded. The police officer, when she inquired, was that her son lying on the ground. And some police officer, a Memphis police officer, said, get your ass back or something. He threatened her and then cursed her out. So can you imagine the pain of that? It reminds me of a story that I found out about. I interviewed the mother and sister and brother of Larry Payne. Larry Payne was the young Memphis youth who was killed by police right after Dr. King's last march in Memphis, we ended up in a riot downtown. He was shot and killed by the police. And when his mom found out about what happened to her son, she raced to the scene. And the police officer said, "Nigga, don't you touch your son. Get your ass back." I got that interview. And it's sad because almost 50 years later, and it's still very traumatic for the family. You can see the traumatic toll that it took on the family because she just she just can't stop crying. Once she started talking about Larry, she just cries. And his brother, he got, he's on heavy medication. It just took a toll on the family how this 16-year-old kid died back in 1968. Even Dr. King found out about what happened to Larry Payne and called Larry Payne's mom to offer his condolences. And I believe Dr. King was on his way to the funeral of Larry Payne. He would have been there for his funeral. Had he not got assassinated the next Thursday. See, Larry Payne was killed the Thursday before Dr. King was killed. He was killed on the Thursday before Dr. King was killed. Dr. King was killed the next Thursday. But he made a call of condolence to Larry Payne's family and mom. And I think he would have spoke at the funeral had he not got slain. So there you go. So there's nothing new under the sun. This is for Mike Brown, Trayvon Martin. This is Larry Payne. How many of y'all know about the Larry Payne story? If you want to find out more about it, go to We All Be and listen to the interviews. We All Be TV on YouTube. But yeah, it's sad. So the TBI, the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation, just turned over the information. They turned over the information about Larry Payne to DA Amy Wyrick of Memphis, the one who defeated Judge Joe Brown last year. Right now, Judge Joe Brown is in jail. He turned himself in Thursday for the incident in child support court, whatever. He gonna be out by Tuesday, I guess, serving 5 days in jail, not in prison. And shout out to Judge Joe Brown, a really stand-up guy. Love him madly. Also, check out his interviews he did with us. Lunch with the Judge on We All Be TV. But yeah, they turned on the information Amy Wyrick, the TBI did. And we'll see what the DA got to say. Will she press charges or indict Officer Schilling? We'll see. Time will tell. But what if she don't do it? What black folks gonna do now? Look at Tremaine Wilborn, the brother who killed Officer Sean Bolton just a couple weeks after Darrius Stewart situation. And I'll talk about that later as well. That Tremaine Wilborn case is interesting. Because I think that's fine. I mean, like, you look at black people, I like reading the comment sections online, these type of, like, polarizing race cases. Because Tremaine Wilborn is a black male who's been in and out of prison. Officer Sean Bolton was a white male who was a army veteran, a military veteran. And he had a hero's funeral. But I don't know too much about anything. I hear that he say, she say, and word on the street, and that whole situation is kind of weird. But it's funny how black folks, a white boy could kill 9 black folks at Bible study, and then 48 hours later we could be so quick to forgive what this white boy did. But then when this black man killed this white cop under questionable circumstances, we don't really know what happened that night. I can hear black folks say, "Well, fry that nigga like baloney, put him under jail." No compassion, no empathy for your own. So this is a poison of this system and how it works on the psyche and mind of black folk. This is something we got to detox and reprogram ourselves from. But yeah, the Darius Stewart case, man, I met the mom and the family right after Farrakhan speech. I was able to get to Farrakhan, but hopefully I might have a chance to interview him and get to him. This award that we have. But anyway, I just said that I'm pulling for them. And they was so hurting so bad, his auntie and stuff, and it's just sad. It's really sad. But that could happen to any one of us, we could be a victim of something tragic. And if we have a bad report card or low credit score, we owe on child support, or that one incident where we was caught smoking weed, and white folks read it as, well, he did smoke weed that time. He does have a low credit score. I guess he deserved what he got. See, that's what happened. You get no compassion. You get no empathy. It's like people talking about, this monster that is Bryce Williams, a.k.a. Vester Flanagan. I think that's his name. And yet the white dude who was a whistleblower who killed their black security guard at the NYC Federal Building just a week ago, they're not saying anything about that. I mean, I saw the comments online. The white folks like, everybody has a snapping point. Everybody, you know, they have a boiling point. He went through so much. He was a whistleblower. His fiance had cancer. She died. It left him in financial ruin. They made all these excuses to find some type of compassion and empathy for the white man who did just killed this black security guard in the place where he used to work at. You know, you look all that up, but then this guy come along. He talked about the abuse and the bullying he endured at work. Allegedly, he was not taken seriously. People thought he was crazy. Then he talked about the incident where somebody left a watermelon, I guess, during a company picnic or something, and he thought it was offensive. And see, you know, white folks have the luxury of not having to be compassionate and empathetic towards people of color in the system, because it's not about us. Like I said, racism, white supremacy is about white folks. It has nothing to do with us, but we want to make it about us because we want to be with them so bad. So what it really calls for, unfortunately, was the reality of the situation is you got to have a form of separation. And people will say that's racism. I said, not necessarily. If you don't know who you are, adding more people and things to the mix only confuse you. Once again, if you don't know who you really are, adding more people and things to the mix only confuse you. And that's just being honest. It's not even about, it's about for survival and self-preservation more so. It's about hate. It's like people say, what about the white folks that want to stay with the black people, or the black people want to stay with the white folks? If you do want to stay with the white folks, or you want to stay with the black folks, then you must be willing to submit to the rules of that group. See, the reason why we get catching hell because you want to be, a lot of us want to be with the white people. And we got to, you know, we're in a system of white supremacy, racism. So if you want to do that, you got to accept their rules. So that means that your life don't matter. Don't complain about it if your life don't matter. Don't complain about how we treat you if you want to be around us. So that's just common sense to me. But it's just like, that's why it's so important to get this stuff out there. So you got Mike Brown, Darrius Stewart, Emmett Till, Trayvon Martin, fill in the blank. Just put anybody in. So when does it end? When does it end, black people? When does it end? But yeah, but it is what it is. But I want to thank everybody. You know, it's my thing. I have not got to everything I want to talk about. But I have other shows on. Feel free, family, if you like what you heard, to support what we do. By donating to our PayPal link, or also sending a check, a money order, rather preferably a money order, to our P.O. box. In the words of the great Duke Ellington, we love you all madly. Keep on producing and pushing.